Hi everybody! Let's paint some clouds today. We're going to be doing shades of violet and blue. I'm going to be using Daniel Smith watercolors, quinacridone violet and indanthrone blue. Maybe even adding a little bit of burnt umber here so that we can have a nice silhouette of some trees. All right, so give it a shot and tell me how it goes in the comments below. So I'm going to be using quinacridone violet with indanthrone blue. If you have a different violet or purple and another dark blue, you're welcome to use that too. And this is the scene we're actually going to do. Taking the light purple as a replacement for the blue and the dark blue as a replacement for this grayer color up above here. Now imagine, as we're painting this, that there's a vanishing point. So imagine you're standing here and you're looking up above at the clouds right above your head. They look really big and fluffy. And as you start to look towards the horizon, which is over here, the clouds get further and further away, and they seem to appear smaller and smaller, and they're following parallel to the horizon. And so up here, they appear closer and on an angle. So imagine this is the vanishing point over here. And then it starts to just go down, down, far away, far away, far away. And so that's what I'm thinking about when I'm painting these clouds. Now you're welcome to use whatever two color combinations you like. For this one I used cerulean blue and burnt umber, and when those two are mixed, they create this beautiful grayish blue color here. And I actually used a little bit of blue in this burnt umber to create the color for the treetops in the background and the little birds here. For this one, I created a value scale using these colors for the clouds, but for the rolling hills in the background to create this illusion of atmospheric perspective or atmospheric distortion, where land appears much paler the further away you see. I added some extra water to this indanthrone blue, and I really lightened it. So I created a value scale of light, a little bit darker, and then the darkest. Okay, so we're going to be doing this scene using these colors. The first thing that I do is I prepare my paper. This is cold press, 140 pound, 300 grams per square inch, 100% cotton. And this is tape that I've gotten that's specifically for watercolor paper. So I just kind of line it up and then create a nice white border. It's really easy to rip. If you use painter's tape, it will most likely rip your paper. So I don't use the traditional painter's tape that you would see in the hardware store. It's just too sticky. This is much gentler. And you can buy this on Amazon or in your local art store. Okay, so now that's all ready to go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to dunk my brush into the water. Now, I really dunk it. I don't dunk and take off, I just dunk it. And I wet that surface so that it's nice and moist. Not soaking wet, just damp enough to be able to allow the paint to burst out. This is a bit too wet for me right now, so I'm just going to take up some of this water until I can see that it's just damp, nothing is pooling. That's great the way that is now. So remembering the angle of the clouds, I'm going to start up here and I'm just going to dot it on. Notice how it bursts out into the damp page around it. I'm leaving enough white space to represent the sky. This is the shadow underneath the clouds. Now I'm starting to straighten out a little bit. And going closer together, I'm allowing a little bit less white space in between, and then I'm starting to make little lines because there's not as much detail the farther away we go. Okay, while this is still wet, I'm going to take my indanthrone blue and put this just above. So imagine this is the shadow. The sun is down here, it's set below the horizon. So we're getting some nice deep colors in the sky. And notice when you look up at the sky at different times of the day, what is it doing? What are the colors that you see? Notice where the highlights are and where the shadows are, depending on what time of day it is and where the sun is. Always ask yourself, where is my light source? Okay, so I like how this is coming along. If there's ever some paint spreading up into the white and taking over the white that you don't want, what you can do is you can take some paper towel, dry your brush, and use your brush with the thirsty brush technique. So you can actually scoop some of that color off if it's more than you want, and you can shape how much white space you have here just by scoop it up, take it off, scoop it up, take it off. And that's how you can create the effect of some soft, fluffy clouds. Or push that paint around a little bit more if you prefer. It's up to you. Clouds are always changing. There's no one right way. So play around with it. So notice how it starts to get a little bit pale as it dries. So I'm going to add a little bit more violet just to punch up that color, especially up here. Now, if you don't really like these sharp lines, what you can do is you can take off the extra paint and just dip the tip of your brush in like that. So I'm not dunking it, I'm just dipping the tip in to moisten the tip. And then you can go in here and soften that edge a little bit. As you're softening, you are lifting some paint. So just be mindful of where your brush is going and how much is going down back onto the paper. And you can even increase the shadows if you want to, just by adding a little bit more indanthrone blue or whatever dark blue that you have, just putting them up against that violet, just for a little extra drama in the sky. I like how that's bursting out there, so I'm going to leave that alone. Just be mindful not to overwork it. Okay, and so now I'm just going to add a little bit more along the bottom here. So I put it down, I draw my brush, dip the tip in, and then I can soften these lines a little bit. Okay. Okay, I like how that's looking. So the next part is, now this is pretty dry down here already. It's mostly just a little bit damp up here. So the next part is I'm going to add some little treetops. First, I'm going to paint this going across, and then I'm going to use the tip of my brush and push a little bit of that paint up. And then I'm going to use my fine brush to make the little extra trees popping out above. Now, if your brush ever gets splayed out like that, a really easy tip is to put it in some water. So you can dunk it in some water and then pull and twist. And then that reshapes it like that. I'm going to take a bit of indanthrone blue, a bit of violet, a bit of brown. Okay, so I'm going to test out my color. That's too blue. So I'm going to add a bit more brown. That's better. Okay, that'll be good for my first go. Watercolor does dry pretty pale, so you might need to do a couple of layers. So I'll use this for my first layer, and then I'm just going to push this line up while it's still damp to create the illusion of the tops of a forest, these little tree tops. Making sure that that tree line is irregular. We don't want it to look like it's got a pattern in it. Humans tend to want to create patterns. It's very natural. But if you look at nature, no two trees look exactly the same. And so we're going to make sure that they're expressed in their uniqueness, just like we are. Okay, so I'm going to load up my little mini brush here, and every so often, depending on how you've created your painting, however you want some balance. There's a lot happening on this right side, so I'm going to add some treetops on this left side. Maybe I'll put in a Scotch pine over here. Scotch pines are really interesting because they've got these wonky, big, majestic branches like that, and then a trunk. So whatever trees you like, go ahead and put those in. I tend to avoid putting trees directly in the middle, just a little offside. I find it a little bit easier on the eyes. Sweet. Okay, so if you notice how much paler it's drying, so what I'm going to do is I'll mix a bit of a darker color here, the indanthrone blue and the brown. I'll test that out. That's a little bit darker, I like that, but I'm going to put some more violet in there. There we go. I really like that color. So I'm going to add that down here. Because it's still damp, I'm just kind of dotting it in and allowing it to move up into wherever else it's wet or damp. And by dotting it, what I'm doing is I'm helping to protect the paper too, because if you are doing too many brush strokes, what can happen is that it gets linty. The paper loses its integrity. But this way, I'm still letting the color move up there, and if you want to, you can add a bit more into some of these treetops and leave the rest as some distant silhouettes. Okay, I like that. Now, this is looking a little bit funny. So I'm going to maybe try to make it into more of a tree shape. Oh well, that's okay. I'll just make a whole bunch of little trees here overlapping, making it look like it's closer. And maybe this part is more receding into the distance. There we go. Easy peasy. Everything is figure outable. If it doesn't look right, maybe it's just not finished. Okay. There we go. Oh, I like that. That's much better. And because now we're kind of heavy on the right, I want to put a little extra something on the left. So I think right about here, now I moved my brush around a little bit to eye it. I want to put two little birdies. So here doesn't quite feel right because there's a tree right there. Here feels a little bit better, but again, there's a little tree right there. So I think, oh, so if I put it down here, it's quite low, but if I put it up here, then what happens is that now there's like a triangle, like my eye kind of moves up there and it follows this. It's not right above these treetops. So I think right here is a great spot for the little birdies. And I'm using the same color. There we go. There's one. And the other. Very gentle. There we go. And now I'm going to get my hair dryer and I'm going to dry this before I peel off the masking tape to make sure that the paper itself doesn't rip, because it tends to rip if it's damp. So let's make sure that's really dry before we pull that tape off. There we go. Okay, so for those of you who want to try adding a little bit of extra warmth under these clouds and behind these trees, let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to retape my painting and then we'll start mixing the paint. I'm going to add a little bit of coral mixed with a touch of this orange, and I'm going to add that just underneath a few of these clouds and then create a silhouette behind these trees. So this will just brighten up your painting so that it's nice and sun-kissed. So starting with a clean brush, I'll take a little bit of this coral and add a little bit of this orange. I'll test out my color. I like that, but it's really strong. So I'm just going to take my extra paint off on a paper towel, add a bit of extra water off to the side here, and test it out again. I do like that, but I feel like it needs a bit more orange, and then test out my color. That's what I'm going for. Okay, so I'm going to dip my brush in again, add it to my color so it's nice and juicy, and I'm imagining the sun is just down here. So I'm going to add a little bit of color here and here under my violet. I'll dry my brush and I'm going to scoop some of this color out using my dry brush, just making sure that it's really nice and fine and that it's not too overwhelming for the painting that's behind it. I'm just doing a very fine glaze on top. That's the idea. So I'll dip my brush in again, and I'm just going to start bringing a bit of this color down that's already on my brush. There we go. Maybe even just a little bit up here. Not too much. We don't want to take it off the edges, towards the edges. We just want to frame it over the sun. Okay, so that works. And now I'm going to create a tiny little silhouette of this color behind the trees that are already here. Look at the sunset next time and notice how it changes the color directly around it. It doesn't affect everything. It would be, for example, these ones is on the left side of the trees, and these ones it's on the right edge of the trees. And it's not quite down here because those are shadowed by the trees around it. But right under the sun, it's on either side of the trees. It's the whole edge. It might even warm behind them over here. And that's pretty much it. That's how you add a little bit of sunset to those clouds. And warm up the scene. Okay, give it a try and tell me how it goes. I'm just going to dry this up a little bit and then I'm going to take off the tape. I noticed that a lot of the color was lost here as it dried, so I'm going to just add a little bit more using my fine brush. I'm going to add a little bit of color on these distant clouds. Along the right like that. I'm going to take my bigger brush and I'm just going to soften these edges as they come out. Maybe add a bit more down below here. Really punch up that color. There we go. I'll dry my brush and then I'm just going to soften these upper edges slightly, like that, a little bit fluffier. There we go. I really like that. I'm going to dry it. And if you want to take it even further, you can add a bit of gold just where the sun will be, just to really, now you don't need very much of this, it can be quite strong, but just to give an idea of a little extra warmth just down below here. And that's all it really needs. I'm going to lift some of this up. Soften that. Make it just barely there. And then dry it. And that's it. Take off your tape. Gently pulling away from the scene. And always make sure that your paper is really dry first. And there we go. We've got a beautiful little cloudscape with two little birdies flying into the sunset.